On the morning of October 2022, the quiet routine of the city was shattered by a disturbing discovery that would leave the community in shock. Two cyclists, out for an early morning ride, came across the lifeless body of a woman. The area was remote, far removed from major highways. The woman's clothing was still intact, but it appeared dirty and torn. Her body showed clear signs of physical trauma, including multiple bruises and suspected contusions. Police quickly arrived at the scene, cordoning off the area to begin a preliminary investigation. During the evidence collection, investigators found tire tracks in the dirt and drag marks, indicating that the woman's body had likely been moved. In this documentary, we will examine the true crime connected to Ariadna Fernanda Lopez Diaz, who was born on July 5, 1995, in one of the most economically challenged neighborhoods of Mexico City. Her childhood was marked by the stark realities of limited resources, yet it was far from devoid of warmth and care. Raised in a small, tightly knit household, Ariadna's family consisted of her hardworking mother and her older brother Omar, who quickly became her protector and role model. Their lives were further complicated by the absence of a father figure, a man who had distanced himself both emotionally and physically from his responsibilities. Despite his indifference, Ariadna and her family found strength in their unity, holding each other together through mutual support and love. Omar, 5 years older than Ariadna, assumed the role of a father figure with unwavering dedication. He encouraged her dreams, consoled her during her fears, and instilled in her a sense of security that would follow her throughout her life. Ariadna, for her part, idolized her brother and reciprocated his care with boundless affection. This bond between the brother and sister formed a cornerstone of Ariadna's identity, granting her the confidence to navigate a world often fraught with challenges. From a young age, Ariadna exhibited a naturally warm and approachable personality that endeared her to everyone she met. Her sincerity, coupled with an innate willingness to help others, made her not just popular among her peers, but also a dependable friend. Her school years were defined by a network of close friendships, and she frequently shared her dreams and aspirations with her companions. In 2018, Ariadna's life took a tragic turn when her mother was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. At just 23 years old, Ariadna was thrust into a whirlwind of grief and responsibility as the illness progressed rapidly. The loss of their mother dealt a devastating blow to both Ariadna and Omar. It was a moment that marked the end of one chapter of their lives and the beginning of another. In the wake of this tragedy, Ariadna was forced to mature quickly. To honor her mother's memory, she had her name tattooed on her body, a permanent and poignant tribute to the woman who had given her so much. This act became a symbol of Ariadna's resilience and her commitment to carrying her mother's legacy forward. Before her mother's passing, Ariadna had met a young man who quickly became a significant figure in her life. Their relationship blossomed into a romance, and soon Ariadna discovered she was expecting a child. While the arrival of her son brought immense joy, it also ushered in new challenges. The young couple soon realized their paths were diverging. Despite their separation, they maintained an amicable relationship, co-parenting their son with mutual respect. Becoming a mother transformed Ariadna's world. She found herself balancing the demands of single parenthood with the need to secure a stable income. Her first step toward financial independence came in the form of a job at a popular upscale bar in Mexico City. This establishment, frequented by affluent patrons, demanded its employees maintain the highest standards of professionalism. Here, Ariadna developed the ability to interact with a diverse range of personalities, from the affable to the difficult. Her charisma, coupled with a strong work ethic, allowed her to excel despite the challenges that came with the role. Yet this phase of her life was not without its struggles. Long hours and the pressures of the job often weighed heavily on her, but Ariadna persevered, driven by her unwavering love for her son. When the pandemic swept across the globe, Ariadna's life was once again upended. The closure of the bar where she worked left her without a job, plunging her into uncertainty. Refusing to succumb to despair, Ariadna saw this as an opportunity to chase a long-held dream, opening her own beauty salon. With a determination born of necessity, she began to pour her time and energy into bringing this vision to life. Leveraging her network and the skills she had honed over the years, Ariadna successfully launched her salon, which soon became a reliable source of income. During this period, Ariadna met Nu, a man whose presence brought stability and happiness back into her life. Their connection was immediate, and the relationship blossomed into a source of joy and support. Balancing her responsibilities as a mother, business owner, and partner, Ariadna's days were filled with purpose. Despite the demands of her life, she managed to find contentment in the harmony she had created. By the age of 27, Ariadna's life appeared to be a carefully assembled puzzle, with each piece representing a challenge overcome or a milestone achieved. She had endured loss, rebuilt her life from the ground up, and created a stable future for herself and her son. It was during this period that she met Vanessa, a young woman who would introduce an unexpected element into Ariadna's world. Ariadna and Vanessa's paths crossed through mutual acquaintances at a lively social gathering. Vanessa's vibrant and magnetic personality immediately caught Ariadna's attention. Young, bold, and charismatic, Vanessa had an uncanny ability to connect with people, making her the center of attention wherever she went. However, those who knew her well often spoke of her dual nature. Beneath her charm lay a complex character, marked by unpredictability and sharp edges. It was this enigmatic quality that simultaneously fascinated and unsettled those around her. Vanessa's social circle included a variety of individuals, among them Rel, a middle-aged businessman who had gained a reputation for his influential connections and dealings. His reputation was shrouded in a complex web of rumors, built on his immense wealth, far-reaching influence, and an unapologetically lavish lifestyle. Rel was often seen surrounded by young women, many of whom were eager to be part of his enigmatic world. His status was perpetuated by whispers of his connections with powerful figures and even shadowy criminal networks, though no one in his inner circle could ever confirm or deny these allegations with certainty. Rel himself was a master of deflection, avoiding direct conversations about his past or his business dealings. Though Ariadna was intelligent, resourceful, and fiercely independent, she didn't immediately recognize how different her new acquaintances were from her usual social circle. Vanessa, for her part, seemed eager to impress Ariadna and often spoke glowingly about her connections with influential people, frequently bringing up Rel in their conversations. Vanessa painted him as a man who could solve any problem, someone whose reach extended far beyond. Vanessa's exuberance and charisma gradually drew Ariadna into their world. As Ariadna spent more time with Vanessa and her circle, the bonds between them deepened. Vanessa seemed genuinely captivated by Ariadna's personality, going out of her way to gain her trust and loyalty. Rel, intrigued by Ariadna after hearing about her from Vanessa, soon took a direct interest in her. Their first meeting was marked by Rel's remarkable ability to charm and engage. His attentiveness and conversational skills left an impression on Ariadna. His confidence and sophistication were undeniably appealing, and Ariadna, like many others, found herself drawn to him. However, beneath Rel's polished exterior lay a far more complex personality. Those who had dealings with him often described him as calculating and manipulative, but Ariadna's interactions with him painted a picture of a courteous and kind man. Vanessa's role in solidifying the connection between Ariadna and Rel was undeniable. She often invited Ariadna to gatherings where Rel would be present, creating an atmosphere of trust and camaraderie. These gatherings were lively and filled with laughter, drawing Ariadna further into their fold. However, over time, peculiar details began to emerge. Friends of Ariadna, who knew of Rel's questionable reputation and Vanessa's unpredictable nature, started to voice their concerns. They cautioned Ariadna to be wary, hinting that her new social connections could lead to unforeseen risks. Despite their warnings, Ariadna remained optimistic, viewing her friendship with Vanessa as a refreshing escape from the pressures of her daily life. She was intrigued by the opportunity to experience a world previously out of reach, one filled with glamour and excitement. Rel's efforts to win Ariadna over became increasingly evident. His gestures of generosity and friendliness seemed genuine to her, as he frequently extended invitations to dinners and parties. Ariadna, who was in a committed relationship with a young man, maintained her social interactions without any overt conflict. Her partner, described as trusting and supportive, didn't voice objections to her occasional outings. Meanwhile, Vanessa's influence grew stronger. She frequently called Ariadna, organizing meetups and encouraging her to join in various social activities. Rel, too, began to solidify his presence in Ariadna's life, offering assistance and support in subtle but impactful ways. On October 30, 2022, Ariadna accepted an invitation from Vanessa to join her for an evening with friends. The gathering was planned at a popular restaurant in downtown Mexico City. Vanessa assured Ariadna that it would be a relaxed and enjoyable evening, filled with good food and great company. Rel was also expected to attend, a fact that gave Ariadna a flicker of unease. Despite her growing reservations about Rel, she didn't want to jeopardize her friendship with Vanessa and decided to go along. The group came together that evening at the restaurant, a trendy venue known for its elegant interiors and a clientele that exuded wealth and status. The atmosphere was vibrant, with lively music and a bustling crowd creating an air of celebration. At their table, the mood was lighthearted and festive. Wine and cocktails flowed freely, accompanied by an array of expertly prepared appetizers. As the evening progressed, Rel naturally became the center of attention. His magnetic presence, combined with his ability to captivate an audience with his stories, drew everyone in. He interacted confidently with the staff, subtly showcasing his influence and command over any situation. Vanessa supported him seamlessly, adding playful commentary and keeping the energy of the conversation alive. The other guests eagerly followed the lead of Vanessa and Rel, trying their best to match the energy radiating from the evening's charismatic hosts. However, amidst the lively environment, Ariadna's behavior subtly stood out. She seemed slightly detached, frequently glancing at her phone, reading incoming messages, and typing responses with a concentrated expression. Her eyes occasionally lingered on Rel, as though she were attempting to decipher some hidden meaning behind his words or actions. Despite Vanessa's best efforts to engage her, inviting her into conversations and persuading her to sample another cocktail, Ariadna remained reserved. Her demeanor was calm yet distant, and her expression betrayed a sense of unease that suggested her mind was preoccupied with something far more significant than the vibrant scene unfolding around her. Midway through the evening, Ariadna's cryptic social media post sent a ripple of concern through her close-knit circle. "Would you miss me if I disappeared?" she wrote. This ambiguous message caused immediate alarm among her closest friends and family, many of whom recognized the unusual nature of her words. Ariadna had never been known to post anything resembling such dark humor or introspective musings, and the sudden shift left her loved ones unsettled. While some in her broader social circle dismissed the post as a passing joke or an attempt at attention, those who truly knew her could not shake the foreboding impression it left behind. As the evening progressed, Rel proposed that the group relocate to his house to continue their revelries in a more intimate setting. Vanessa immediately voiced her enthusiastic support for the idea, encouraging everyone to join. Ariadna hesitated, visibly uncertain about the suggestion. However, after some cajoling from Vanessa, who assured her that it would be a relaxed and enjoyable continuation of the night, Ariadna reluctantly agreed. The rest of the group followed suit, and together they piled into Rel's luxurious car for the short drive to his upscale home. Located in one of Mexico City's most exclusive neighborhoods, Rel's house was a clear testament to his wealth and status. Its sleek modern design and opulent interior touches left an impression on anyone who stepped inside. Once at Rel's home, the group gathered in a spacious, tastefully furnished living room. The evening carried on with music, laughter, and drinks, but Ariadna's discomfort seemed to grow more palpable. She excused herself multiple times, stepping away to check her phone or pretending to make calls. Her distant and distracted demeanor did not go unnoticed by the others. Vanessa, observant as ever, began whispering with Rel, glancing occasionally in Ariadna's direction. The subtle exchanges between them only served to heighten the tension in the room. Around midnight, Ariadna finally announced her desire to leave, citing fatigue as the reason. Vanessa, however, convinced her to stay a little longer, promising they would leave together in about 30 minutes. Rel, who had grown unusually quiet by this point, occasionally cast furtive glances at Ariadna, his expression unreadable. As the evening wound down, guests began to trickle out one by one. Ariadna, however, remained one of the last to leave, her presence lingering even as the night drew to a close. The following morning, on October 31, 2022, a grim discovery sent shockwaves through the Morelos community. Two cyclists, out for an early morning ride, stumbled upon a woman's lifeless body lying by the side of a remote road. The location was desolate and far removed from any major highways, surrounded by sparse bushes and an unsettling silence. The eerie stillness of the scene only amplified the tragedy. The woman's attire was intact, but appeared soiled and damaged, and her body bore visible signs of trauma, including multiple bruises and suspected contusions. The cyclists, horrified by their discovery, immediately reported the incident to the local authorities. While waiting for law enforcement to arrive, they took photographs of the scene, hoping the images might later assist in identifying the victim or understanding what had transpired. Several hours passed before the police arrived, and during that time, the scene of the crime was virtually undisturbed. Once on site, the authorities cordoned off the area and began a preliminary investigation. Evidence collection revealed tire tracks in the dirt, along with drag marks that suggested the body had been moved. Forensic specialists noted clear indications of a struggle, but the initial cause of death remained uncertain. There were no apparent weapon-related injuries, leaving investigators puzzled about the circumstances leading to the woman's death. Complicating matters further, the victim's identity was unknown, as no personal belongings or identification were found at the scene. Hours later, graphic images of the discovery began circulating on social media, sparking widespread speculation and alarm. Among those who saw the photos were friends and family members of Ariadna, who had been reported missing after her attendance at Rel's gathering the night before. Distinctive features on the victim, including visible tattoos, led many of her loved ones to fear the worst. Her brother Omar immediately filed a missing person report with the authorities, urging them to investigate whether the unidentified woman could be his sister. Meanwhile, the state authorities in Morelos officially launched an investigation into the incident. However, their initial response was met with harsh criticism. Witnesses at the scene reported that critical evidence had been poorly documented. When Ariadna's relatives arrived to officially identify the body, their worst fears were heartbreakingly confirmed. Omar, her devoted older brother, recognized his sister immediately by a distinctive tattoo on her shoulder, a heartfelt tribute to their late mother. The sight was overwhelming, and the family was struck by a tidal wave of grief and despair. Adding to their devastation was the visible condition of her body. Bruises and injuries on her face, arms, and other parts of her body provided undeniable evidence of violence. The sight alone told a story of a struggle, leaving the family with haunting questions. However, the police's initial statements did little to provide clarity. From the moment they left the morgue, the family's focus turned to demanding justice. Omar and other relatives began calling for a transparent investigation and for those responsible to be held accountable. They wasted no time in mobilizing support, reaching out to friends and contacts who were active on social media to amplify the case. What began as a small-scale awareness campaign quickly gained momentum, resonating with thousands of people across various platforms. Ariadna's story became a rallying cry for justice, with hashtags and posts flooding social media, sparking widespread public outrage. Despite this growing pressure, the response from the Morelos police remained troubling. As the investigation progressed, law enforcement's first step was to contact Rel and Vanessa, the two people last known to have seen Ariadna alive. Their statements became the foundation of the initial narrative. Rel claimed that after the gathering at his house, Ariadna had decided to leave by calling a taxi. He described her as appearing slightly upset, but not visibly distressed. According to him, he had walked her to the door where she departed, heading to an unspecified destination. Vanessa's account supported Rel's claims. She added that Ariadna had mentioned needing to leave and had not disclosed where she was going. The first major issue was the lack of evidence to corroborate their claims about the taxi. Neither Rel nor Vanessa could provide a driver's name, contact information, or any concrete proof to back up their assertions. Investigators, combing through local taxi service records, discovered that although several rides had been logged in the vicinity of Rel's house that night, none of the drivers reported picking up anyone matching Ariadna's description. This glaring discrepancy cast significant doubt on their version of events. The second issue arose from Vanessa's shifting and erratic behavior during questioning. Initially, she was adamant that Ariadna had left alone. Later, however, she admitted that they had argued during the party, a revelation she had previously omitted. Vanessa also attempted to suggest, in messages sent to Ariadna's friends, that Ariadna might have harmed herself, a claim she tied to the cryptic social media post Ariadna had made earlier in the evening. While some dismissed it initially as an offhand remark, investigators began considering it a potential clue to her state of mind that night. In one of her messages to Ariadna's friends, Vanessa admitted that she was worried about her involvement, but refused to explain why she thought so. Initial findings from the investigation offered no definitive answers regarding the exact circumstances surrounding Ariadna's death. However, as law enforcement and independent experts continued their work, crucial evidence began to emerge. Surveillance footage from nearby cameras, text messages recovered from suspects' phones, and the results of 2 separate autopsies provided new insights. The first forensic examination, conducted in the state of Morelos, concluded that Ariadna had died from asphyxiation caused by bronchial aspiration. According to the examiner, the presence of food and alcohol in her airways likely contributed to her death. However, this conclusion was met with immediate skepticism from Ariadna's family. They highlighted the numerous bruises and injuries on her body. Dissatisfied with the official findings, the family demanded a second, independent autopsy. Under mounting pressure from the public and Ariadna's grieving family, her body was transferred to an independent forensic institute in Mexico City for a more thorough examination. The results of the second autopsy unequivocally contradicted the findings of the initial report. Forensic experts identified multiple injuries, including severe head trauma, extensive bruising, and clear evidence of physical force on her arms and legs. These marks suggested a desperate attempt by Ariadna to defend herself, pointing to a violent struggle rather than an accident. The report firmly established that her death was not the result of alcohol or misadventure. The reclassification of her death as a criminal act marked a turning point in the investigation. A key piece of evidence came in the form of surveillance footage obtained from the parking garage. The footage revealed chilling details. It showed Rel carrying Ariadna's lifeless body to his car in the early hours of the morning following the party. The video captured him loading her into the vehicle before driving away, actions that directly implicated him in the concealment of her body. In addition to the damning footage, investigators seized the phones of both Rel and Vanessa, uncovering a trove of incriminating messages. The texts detailed their actions in the aftermath of the party and exposed their coordinated efforts to mislead law enforcement and manipulate Ariadna's friends. Vanessa's anxiety about the mounting pressure from Ariadna's family was evident, as was Rel's repeated reassurances that everything was under control. One particularly damning message included detailed instructions from Rel to Vanessa on how to respond to police inquiries without raising suspicion. These instructions demonstrated a clear attempt to obstruct the investigation. Vanessa's communication with Ariadna's friends also revealed her efforts to deflect suspicion. She repeatedly suggested that Ariadna had been emotionally distressed. However, this narrative stood in stark contrast to statements from Ariadna's friends and family, who described her as a cheerful and vibrant individual with no history of such tendencies. Vanessa was the first to be apprehended. Her arrest occurred under the glare of intense public scrutiny, as media outlets and social activists closely followed the developments. During her initial interrogation, Vanessa vehemently denied any involvement, claiming she had gone to bed early on the night in question and was unaware of what transpired. However, her statements were riddled with contradictions. Text messages retrieved from her phone proved that she was fully aware of the events and had even discussed them in detail with Rel. Furthermore, evidence surfaced that Vanessa had deliberately deleted photos, messages, and other incriminating information to obscure her role in the cover-up. Realizing the mounting evidence, Rel ultimately decided to turn himself in, arriving at the authorities' offices accompanied by a team of high-profile lawyers. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Rel maintained his innocence, claiming he did not harm Ariadna. According to his account, he discovered her unresponsive in his home the morning after the party. Panicking and fearing the consequences, he allegedly decided to dispose of her body to avoid suspicion. However, this explanation was riddled with inconsistencies. Investigators noted that Rel's behavior, including his documented efforts to hide the body and fabricate a story, was not consistent with someone acting out of panic, but rather with someone deliberately trying to cover up a crime. As interrogations intensified and more evidence came to light, investigators confirmed that at least one of the suspects had deeper knowledge of the events of that fateful night than they were willing to disclose. Both Vanessa and Rel, however, continued to deny any direct responsibility for Ariadna's death. Instead, their statements focused on justifying their actions and deflecting blame. Their evasive behavior only heightened and became a key factor in their temporary detention. The investigation turned into a meticulous process, with authorities working to unravel the motives and circumstances behind the tragedy. This involved reconstructing the night's events, analyzing technical evidence, and scrutinizing the psychological profiles of everyone involved. Slowly but surely, a clearer picture began to emerge, pieced together from conflicting testimonies, text messages, and forensic analysis. That evening began innocuously at a popular restaurant in downtown Mexico City, where Ariadna, Vanessa, Rel, and several mutual friends gathered for dinner and drinks. Outwardly, the atmosphere seemed cheerful, filled with laughter, casual conversation, and background music. According to witness accounts and text message analysis, Ariadna appeared uncharacteristically quiet and withdrawn. After leaving the restaurant, the group made their way to Rel's upscale home. Vanessa and Rel, as hosts, initially maintained a welcoming demeanor, but their interactions carried an undercurrent of tension. Witnesses reported that Vanessa's sharp remarks toward Ariadna became increasingly pointed as the evening progressed. Ariadna, seemingly determined to avoid conflict, responded with calm composure, deflecting Vanessa's comments without escalation. However, as alcohol began to influence the group's behavior, Vanessa's hostility grew more overt. Witnesses described her raising her voice multiple times, accusing Ariadna of being unfriendly and disrespectful. Although these accusations did not resonate with others present, they added to the escalating tension. Rel, for his part, appeared uncomfortable with Vanessa's behavior but chose to remain neutral, refraining from intervening. A pivotal moment occurred early the next morning when Ariadna was seen attempting to leave the home. Witnesses reported briefly spotting her outside the house, but she returned shortly afterward under unclear circumstances. Investigators later determined that during this time, Vanessa's confrontations with Ariadna had intensified. According to investigators, Vanessa, likely fueled by jealousy and alcohol, accused Ariadna of seeking Rel's attention. This accusation led to an open confrontation. After most of the guests had departed, only a few individuals remained in the house: Vanessa, Rel, and Ariadna. It was during this period that the situation escalated fatally. Vanessa, reportedly heavily intoxicated, began displaying erratic and aggressive behavior. Investigators suspect that it was during this time that the violent incident resulting in Ariadna's fatal injuries occurred. A lingering question that haunted both friends and investigators was why Ariadna had posted such a cryptic message on social media earlier that night. Initially seemed like a flippant or darkly humorous remark, but as the investigation unfolded, its meaning grew more ominous. Friends later revealed that Ariadna may have felt deeply unsettled by the gathering's atmosphere, particularly Vanessa's behavior. The post, they speculated, could have been an attempt to signal distress, attract attention, or even serve as a subtle warning. In the aftermath, Ariadna's 6-year-old son was left in the care of her older brother Omar. As the only male figure remaining in the young boy's life, Omar embraced his new role with unwavering determination. He not only provided financial stability, but also became a source of emotional support for his nephew. Determined to preserve the memory of Ariadna, Omar dedicated himself to raising the boy in an environment filled with the love and warmth that his sister had always provided. They ensured the boy received the care and nurturing he needed to cope with his profound loss, creating a network of unwavering support around him. The preliminary court hearings surrounding Ariadna's death became a crucial milestone in the family's fight for justice. Public and media scrutiny added another layer of pressure, ensuring that each development in the investigation and trial was meticulously documented and openly discussed. The trial, a highly publicized event, centered on the roles of Rel and Vanessa in Ariadna's death. Prosecutors presented a compelling array of evidence, including surveillance footage, phone call records, and recovered text messages. These pieces of evidence painted a damning picture of the suspects' actions, demonstrating not only their involvement in concealing the body, but also their potential role in the violent events leading to Ariadna's death. The surveillance footage, in particular, served as a cornerstone of the prosecution's case, showing Rell transfers Ariadna's lifeless body to his car and subsequently leaving the premises. Text messages revealed a coordinated effort between Rell and Vanessa to obscure the truth and mislead both investigators and Ariadna's friends. The defense, however, sought to challenge the prosecution's narrative, arguing that the tragedy was an unfortunate accident rather than a deliberate act. They questioned the reliability of the evidence, suggesting that it lacked the context needed to establish intent. Despite these efforts, numerous testimonies from witnesses and extensive forensic analyses cast significant doubt on the defense's claims. Expert reports highlighted the injuries sustained by Ariadna, which were consistent with physical assault, further discrediting the notion of an accidental death. A central focus of the trial was uncovering the motives behind the crime. Witnesses familiar with Vanessa painted a picture of a woman prone to impulsive and aggressive behavior, traits that were often exacerbated by alcohol consumption. Testimonies described her as emotionally volatile and prone to jealousy, which aligned with the events leading up to the tragedy. Rell, by contrast, was portrayed as a figure shrouded in mystery. Allegations of a questionable past and rumored ties to criminal organizations added another layer of intrigue to the case. These revelations heightened suspicions about his involvement. The prosecution's case ultimately led to the filing of charges for Ariadna's death. The evidence suggested that the crime could be classified as femicide, act of gender-based violence considered an aggravating factor under Mexican law. If convicted, both Rell and Vanessa faced the possibility of up to 700 years in prison. A local resident, while inspecting his property, stumbled upon a horrifying scene. The discovery was so shocking that he immediately contacted the police. He reported not only the presence of the body, but also clear signs of trespassing on his land. When the police arrived, they were confronted with a gruesome sight. Sharon's prior body was discovered partially undressed, clothed only in a suede jacket and a blue sweater. Her jeans were found discarded several meters away from the body. The tape used to gag her mouth bore clear evidence of her desperate attempts to free herself. It was heavily chewed and tangled in her hair. The marks on her neck unmistakably indicated strangulation as the primary cause of death, yet it wasn't the only injury she had sustained. To explore this true crime with real photographs, let's go back to the very beginning. In the heart of a cold winter in 1959, Sharon Pryor was born in the picturesque and vibrant city of Montreal, Canada. Sharon's mother, a spirited woman originally from the United Kingdom, had emigrated to Canada during her early years. Having embraced the Canadian way of life wholeheartedly, she grew into a confident and compassionate individual who would later play a pivotal role in her children's lives. It was in Canada that she crossed paths with George, a disciplined and charismatic Canadian Army soldier. Their meeting was serendipitous, yet their connection was instant and profound. The young couple fell deeply in love, and their whirlwind romance culminated in marriage within a remarkably short span of time. Not long after their union, the couple welcomed their first child, Sharon. Sharon's birth brought immense joy to her parents, filling their home with laughter and warmth. The early years of their marriage were filled with hope and dreams, setting the stage for the expansion of their family. By 1962, the family grew even larger with the birth of twins, Doreen and Maureen. These twin siblings arrived just days before Sharon's second birthday, transforming her from an only child to the eldest sibling. As the eldest, Sharon took on her role with a natural tenderness and a sense of responsibility that belied her young age. George, devoted to his military career, was soon transferred to the city of Manitoba. With a mixture of excitement and apprehension, the family packed their belongings and relocated to one of Manitoba's more established neighborhoods. Life in Manitoba introduced new routines and challenges for the family. In their new home, George and his wife welcomed another child, a son named George Jr., completing their family of 6. However, the strain of constant relocations and the pressures of military life began to take a toll on the couple's relationship. By 1965, the cracks in their marriage became insurmountable, and the couple made the difficult decision to part ways. The divorce marked a turning point for the family. George continued his service in the Army, often stationed far from home, while Sharon's mother assumed the role of both caregiver and provider. Relocating to Langley under a special assistance program for military families, the family found solace in a modest yet cozy apartment. Langley offered a peaceful environment, and the support network provided by the program helped ease the transition for the family. Despite the upheaval, Sharon exhibited a remarkable resilience and a nurturing spirit that endeared her to everyone around her. From a young age, Sharon displayed an extraordinary empathy, especially toward animals. She would often rescue stray dogs and cats from the streets, nursing them back to health with unwavering patience and care. Her love for animals fueled her dream of becoming a veterinarian, a goal she pursued with quiet determination. Sharon's interests extended beyond her love for animals. She was an active and creative child, finding joy in sports and artistic endeavors alike. Her passion for learning and exploring the world around her set her apart. As she matured, her independence and wisdom became increasingly evident, earning her admiration from her peers and profound pride from her mother. By the mid-1970s, Sharon had blossomed into a bright and ambitious teenager. At 16, she navigated the typical challenges and uncertainties of adolescence with a level-headedness that impressed those around her. She had also begun a relationship with John, a boy who had harbored feelings for her since they were in 4th grade. After years of perseverance, John finally won Sharon's affection, and the young couple's bond grew stronger with time. Their love was sincere and genuine, and they enjoyed spending time with friends. Sharon's parents, recognizing the depth of their feelings, supported their relationship wholeheartedly. March 29, 1975, dawned like any other day in the Pryor household. The family was abuzz with anticipation as preparations for Easter celebrations were underway. Sharon woke up early, savoring a simple breakfast before helping her mother unpack groceries and gifts. Her mother had returned from shopping laden with bags filled with treats and supplies for the holiday. Together, they organized the items, chatting and laughing as they worked. The day held special significance, as friends and family were expected to gather for a festive dinner. Sharon busied herself painting Easter eggs, her artistic flair evident in the intricate designs she created. Among the early arrivals was Stephen, a close family friend who shared a special bond with Sharon and her siblings. Stephen and Sharon had planned to visit the district sports association after school that day. Sharon was particularly excited to collect a special jacket named Leo, a tribute to one of the organization's founders who had succumbed to leukemia. However, her excitement turned to disappointment when she learned that there were no jackets available in her size. Despite this setback, Sharon maintained her cheerful demeanor, vowing to return another time to claim her prize. She and Stephen made their way back home, where the atmosphere was filled with the tantalizing aroma of the festive dinner being prepared. As the evening unfolded, the Pryor home came alive with the sounds of laughter and chatter. Sharon and her mother placed vibrantly colored Easter eggs around the house, delighting in the thought of the younger children discovering them. Then the woman asked her mother for permission to visit the Pizzeria Marina, which was a popular place for teenagers near their home. This was not the first time a mother had let her daughter go there with friends, and this was the norm. Sharon went to her room to get ready, humming softly to herself as she contemplated the evening ahead. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, a close friend from the neighboring area dropped by Sharon's house. Their friendship was marked by warmth and laughter, and as Sharon prepared for her evening walk, they shared a light-hearted conversation filled. Sharon carefully chose her outfit, opting for her favorite suede jacket, which she had always considered her lucky charm, and borrowed one of her mother's sweaters. The women left the house together at 6:30, their footsteps echoing against the pavement as they walked side by side. However, Sharon's friend decided not to accompany her to the pizzeria and instead headed home after they bid each other goodbye. Sharon, undeterred, continued on her way alone, her thoughts focused on meeting her friends. By the time Sharon's friends had gathered near the bustling pizzeria, the group was already abuzz with energy and anticipation. They chatted and laughed, eagerly waiting for Sharon to join them. But as the minutes ticked by, it became clear that she wasn't arriving as expected. Initially, they shrugged it off, assuming she had taken a detour to spend a little time with her boyfriend, John. Unaware of any reason to worry, the teenagers continued their cheerful gathering, completely oblivious to the ominous turn the evening was about to take. Elsewhere, John and a few of his friends were at home, engrossed in watching a heated hockey match on television. The game ended later in the evening, and the group decided to head to the pizzeria, expecting to find Sharon there. When they arrived, however, she was nowhere to be seen. John, puzzled and concerned, began asking around, but quickly realized no one had seen her since school earlier that day. This was entirely unlike Sharon, who was known for her punctuality and reliability. Her unexplained absence sent a ripple of unease through the group. Meanwhile, Sharon's mother had spent the evening putting the younger children to bed before settling in front of the TV to unwind. As the clock inched closer to midnight, she couldn't ignore the growing unease gnawing at her. Sharon should have been home hours ago. Although she initially tried to reassure herself with the thought that her daughter might have lost track of time, the prolonged silence became increasingly difficult to ignore. Staying up in the living room, she periodically glanced out the window, her heart sinking further with each passing hour. When midnight struck and Sharon was still absent, her mother's worry turned to outright fear. It was too late to call anyone without potentially disturbing them, but the thought of waiting until morning was unbearable. With dawn's first light, she began frantically making calls to Sharon's friends and acquaintances, hoping for any clue about her whereabouts. Her worry deepened as one by one. They all admitted they hadn't seen Sharon since the previous evening. Even John was at a loss, expressing his own mounting concern. By now, it was clear that something was terribly wrong. As Sharon's mother pieced together the timeline, a troubling account from Sharon's best friend Mary sent a chill down her spine. Mary shared news of an incident that had taken place outside the very same pizzeria Sharon was headed to. Cheryl Roy, a 23-year-old woman, had been attacked by an unknown man wielding a knife. The assault occurred shortly after 7 p.m. But fortunately, Cheryl's screams attracted the attention of bystanders, causing the assailant to flee. Witnesses described him as a tall man with a mustache, dark hair, and piercing blue eyes. He had spoken in a quiet, unsettlingly calm voice and was dressed in a ski jacket, blue jeans, and pointed-toe shoes. The direction in which he fled aligned eerily with the route Sharon would have taken. Overwhelmed by panic, Sharon's mother rushed to the police station, desperate for their help. The detectives, while cautious not to jump to conclusions, understood the gravity of the situation and wasted no time launching a large-scale search operation. News of Sharon's disappearance spread quickly, galvanizing the community. Hundreds of concerned citizens joined the search, armed with photos and detailed descriptions of the 16-year-old. They combed through every corner of the area, driven by a shared determination to bring her home. Sharon's mother made a heartfelt plea on local television. She appealed to anyone who could help find her daughter and report it to the authorities. Unfortunately, the search did not yield any results. As the days passed, there was no information about Sharon's whereabouts. The anguished mother clung desperately to the hope that her beloved daughter would somehow return home safely. The police, who had been working tirelessly on the case, tried to maintain a semblance of hope for her sake, even though they understood the grim reality. After the critical 48-hour window had elapsed, the chances of finding a missing person alive diminished drastically. This weighed heavily on the investigators, but they pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. Sharon's disappearance baffled everyone who knew her. She had no reason to run away from home. Her life was free of conflict, whether at home or school. Her relationship with her boyfriend John was filled with love, mutual respect, and understanding. John was widely regarded as a kind and decent young man who could not have harmed her. Furthermore, Sharon had no known enemies and actively avoided bad influences. Her friends described her as a gentle soul who was always ready to help others. These factors left the police with no suspects or clear leads, a frustrating hurdle in their investigation. Despite their best efforts, attempts to locate the man who had attacked Cheryl Roy with a knife proved fruitless. Witness descriptions painted a picture of a tall, mustachioed individual with dark hair and blue eyes, but he seemed to vanish without a trace. This tense silence and lack of progress took a toll on Sharon's mother. She found herself trapped in a limbo of hope and dread, praying for a miracle but bracing for the worst. At around 6 in the morning on April 1st, Sharon's mother stirred from a restless sleep and looked out the window. Her eyes caught sight of a young man emerging from Sharon's friend's house across the street. He moved quickly, crossing the road and bending down to pick up a newspaper from her doorstep. Something about his behavior struck her as suspicious. Why was he taking a newspaper that didn't belong to him so early in the morning? Acting on instinct, she called out to him, demanding to know what he was doing. Instead of responding, the young man quickened his pace, clutching the newspaper tightly. Alarmed, she ran outside after him, her voice rising with urgency. When she caught up to him, she demanded the newspaper. The man, clearly panicked, begged her not to look, but she snatched it from his hands. Her trembling fingers unfolded the paper, and her breath caught in her throat. There, on the front page, was a haunting image: the lifeless body of a young woman lying in the snow. The caption revealed that the body had been discovered just a few minutes' drive from their suburban neighborhood. The woman's mind raced as she tried to process the shocking news. How could the police not have informed her before the story broke in the press? She felt betrayed and overwhelmed by the horrifying possibility that the woman in the photo could be her daughter. Desperately clinging to the hope that the deceased woman was someone else, Sharon's mother scrutinized the photo. The resemblance to Sharon was undeniable, and the clothing described in the article matched the description she had given the police. Shaking, she picked up the phone and called the detectives, demanding answers. They confirmed that the body's identity had not yet been officially established and invited her to come in for identification. Paralyzed by fear, she could not bring herself to go and ask her ex-husband to take her place. The entire neighborhood was in shock as word spread. The photo in the newspaper left little doubt that the missing woman was indeed Sharon. Her father arrived at the coroner's office and immediately identified the body as his daughter. The news shattered the family. The vivacious and loving 16-year-old was gone, and her tragic death sent ripples of grief and anger through the community. The discovery of Sharon's body came from a local resident who had read about her disappearance in the newspaper. While inspecting his property, he stumbled upon the horrifying scene. He immediately called the authorities, reporting not only the body but also signs of trespassing on his property. The man explained that his home was always closed. There were no signs of a typical break-in, which led him to believe that the intruder might have had a key. This eerie detail added another layer of mystery to the case. When the police arrived, they were met with a gruesome sight. Sharon's body was discovered partially undressed, wearing only a suede jacket and a blue sweater with no clothing below the waist. Her jeans were found discarded a few meters away, and her underwear was hanging in a nearby tree, a chilling detail that spoke to the brutality of the crime. The tape that had been used to gag her mouth was heavily chewed and tangled in her hair. In one hand, she clutched a piece of the tape, evidence of her desperate struggle to free herself in her final moments. Traces in the snow painted a grim and haunting picture of Sharon's final moments. The impressions indicated that she had made a desperate attempt to rise, struggling for life against insurmountable odds. This evidence suggested that her killer had left her to die while she was still alive, succumbing to her injuries in the bitter cold. The tortured woman had fought valiantly, but her battered body lacked the strength to save itself. The crime scene held further clues that deepened the mystery and highlighted the brutal nature of the attack. About 50 feet away from where Sharon's lifeless body was found, investigators discovered wheel tracks embedded in the snow, leading to a barely discernible trail of blood drops stretching toward the body. The absence of drag marks indicated that she had not been moved along the ground. Instead, the evidence suggested that multiple individuals might have been involved, carrying her from a vehicle before leaving her in the desolate area. Her shoes, socks, and body bore no traces of dirt or grime, supporting the theory that she had not crawled to her location on her own. Nearby, a man's shirt was discovered lying in the snow, and it bore a sinister connection to the crime. The victim's wrists showed clear signs of having been bound, likely with this very garment. This piece of evidence provided a crucial detail about the perpetrator, hinting that he was likely tall based on the shirt's size. A short distance from the gatepost, another critical clue was found: a distinct shoe print pressed into the snow which could potentially belong to the killer. Additionally, a receipt for the Leo jacket, the prize Sharon had been so eager to collect, was discovered near the scene, a tragic reminder of the plans she never got to fulfill. The forensic examination of Sharon's body revealed harrowing details about her death. Experts determined that she had been killed only a few hours before her body was discovered, confirming that she had been held captive from Saturday to Tuesday. The marks on her neck pointed to strangulation as the primary cause of death, but it was not the only injury she had endured. The woman had choked on her own blood, a result of severe internal trauma. She had also suffered a catastrophic head injury, internal bleeding, multiple stab wounds, and a broken jaw on both sides. Each injury painted a picture of unimaginable suffering and cruelty. Despite the wealth of evidence collected at the scene, including the shirt, shoe print, and blood trail, the investigation did not progress as anticipated. Detectives initially believed that the clues would lead them to the perpetrator within days. However, as days turned to weeks and then months, the case grew colder. For 13 agonizing months, the investigators failed to identify a prime suspect they could formally charge with the crime. The police interviewed 38 individuals who had some connection to Sharon on the evening she disappeared. Among these, 6 suspects were taken into custody based on witness descriptions and circumstantial evidence. Frank Daly, the manager of the pizzeria where Sharon had intended to spend her evening, became a person of significant interest to the authorities. Despite their efforts, none of the suspects could be conclusively linked to the crime, and all were eventually released due to a lack of direct evidence. Investigators also scrutinized Sharon's close friends, but no new leads emerged. Many of the suspects provided alibis that checked out. Some had been watching a sporting event at home, while others had been present at the pizzeria. The investigation reached a frustrating impasse, with no new information to propel it forward. Every lead turned into a dead end, and the detectives were left with more questions than answers. As the months dragged on, hope for a resolution faded. Everyone, except for Sharon's mother, seemed resigned to the possibility that the truth might never come to light. The grief-stricken mother refused to give up. She was convinced that Sharon could not have traveled far from their home that evening. According to her calculations, the abduction must have occurred almost immediately after Sharon parted ways with her friend. A neighbor who regularly walked the same route at the same time claimed he had not seen the woman, supporting the theory that the perpetrator had acted swiftly and with precision. The narrow time window in which the crime occurred suggested a premeditated act, executed flawlessly to avoid detection. No witnesses came forward, making it seem as though the abduction was orchestrated by a ghost. Sharon's mother strongly believed that the answer lay closer to home. She urged detectives to take a closer look at the residents of their street. Someone might have noticed a stranger lurking in the area or recognized the perpetrator if he was a local. The detectives considered her theory and speculated that the killer was a young man, likely still living with his parents. In their view, he may have harbored deep-seated psychological issues that manifested as violent rage and hatred toward women. The police quickly came to the chilling conclusion that this heinous attack was unlikely to have been the perpetrator's first. Worse yet, they feared that if the maniac was not apprehended soon, it would not be his last. Detectives revisited the case of Cheryl, a woman who had been attacked around the same time as Sharon. Cheryl's life had been saved by the intervention of passers-by, which forced her knife-wielding assailant to flee before completing his grim intent. Witnesses to Cheryl's attack had provided a detailed verbal portrait of the man, but despite exhaustive efforts, he remained elusive. The investigators considered it highly improbable that 2 unrelated predators could be operating in one of the city's quietest neighborhoods simultaneously. Thus, they began to suspect that Cheryl's assailant and Sharon's killer were one and the same. The criminal's behavior further supported this theory. His movements suggested an intimate familiarity with the area. He navigated through the streets without arousing suspicion, leaving no clear evidence behind. The investigators agreed with Sharon's mother's intuition. The killer probably presented himself as an affable, unassuming individual, the type who could easily gain the trust of gullible victims. The police focused their investigation on local residents with records of harassment or domestic abuse. Any individual with a history of violent behavior became a potential suspect. Unfortunately, the killer always seemed to stay one step ahead of the police. Investigators faced significant challenges due to the limitations of the time. Modern technologies, such as DNA analysis, CCTV surveillance, and geolocation tracking, had not yet been developed. Despite these obstacles, the officers worked tirelessly, piecing together evidence in an attempt to capture the elusive killer. Their progress was agonizingly slow, and the predator used this to his advantage, striking again with devastating consequences. 6 years after Sharon's mutilated body was discovered, another tragedy shook the community. Tammy Leakey became the next known victim. The same forensic experts who had examined Sharon's case were called in to investigate Tammy's death. They immediately noticed unsettling parallels between the 2 crimes, strengthening the theory that both murders were the work of the same serial killer. On March 20th, 1981, Tammy was visiting her grandmother. Like Sharon, she disappeared just a few blocks from the house where she had been staying. The elderly woman, feeling unwell, had asked Tammy to run a simple errand to the store. but Tammy never returned. Later, on her way to the store, her mother found her glasses lying on the sidewalk. This small yet ominous detail filled her with dread. She reported her daughter's disappearance to the police, who immediately began searching for the missing woman. A witness soon came forward, providing a critical lead. They described seeing a man in a beige raincoat emerge from a small red car. The man had forcefully grabbed Tammy, shoving her into the vehicle as she screamed for help. Hours later, Tammy was found barely clinging to life in an open field. A passerby had stumbled upon her battered body and called the authorities. Paramedics arrived swiftly and fought valiantly to save her life, but her injuries were too severe and proved incompatible with life. As in previous cases, the attacker displayed a shocking degree of carelessness, leaving behind numerous traces and clues. However, despite the abundance of physical evidence collected, none of it brought investigators closer to solving the heinous murders. The investigation hit a frustrating dead end, leaving detectives grappling with unanswered questions and elusive leads. Around this time, reports of similar attacks on young women began surfacing in neighboring regions of Canada. These cases shared eerie parallels with Sharon's murder, further complicating the investigation. Among the most striking was the tragic case of 17-year-old Lisa Blau. In 1978, her lifeless body was discovered just meters from her home in Montreal. She had been returning from a disco club in the early hours of the morning when someone struck her violently on the head, killing her instantly. Despite extensive inquiries, the perpetrators of this crime were never identified. As similar cases accumulated, law enforcement agencies struggled to determine whether they were dealing with a single serial killer or multiple unrelated attackers. The sheer volume of unsolved murders left investigators overwhelmed and mired in speculation. In 2000, Sharon's mother, driven by an undying determination to seek justice, contacted the police once again. She implored them to re-examine the evidence in her daughter's case, urging the use of modern forensic technology that had advanced significantly in the intervening years. Over a quarter-century had passed, and with the advent of DNA analysis and other scientific breakthroughs, the hope of finding answers seemed brighter than ever. A week later, however, the mother received a devastating response that shook her to her core. Much of the physical evidence collected during the original investigation had mysteriously disappeared in 1995. The missing items included critical materials that could have provided invaluable insights. Only a few pieces of evidence had survived, including Sharon's clothing and a shirt believed to belong to the suspect. Forensic experts focused their attention on the shirt, painstakingly analyzing it for any biological traces. Their efforts paid off when they managed to isolate a DNA sample that did not match Sharon's. It was a significant breakthrough, but even after cross-referencing the sample with genetic databases, no match could be found. The precious biological material was preserved carefully for future comparison with any suspects that might emerge. In June 2004, the investigation took an intriguing turn when police received a tip about a garage that might have been used by Sharon's killer to hold her captive. Detectives acted swiftly, arriving at the location and conducting an exhaustive search of the property. Unfortunately, no physical evidence was found that could conclusively link the garage to the crime. 3 DNA samples were collected from the scene, but none matched either Sharon's genetic profile or the intruder's biological traces recovered from her clothing. This led to further frustration for investigators, as yet another promising lead failed to yield results. In 2012, an unexpected development brought renewed attention to the case. An anonymous benefactor publicly announced a substantial monetary reward, up to $10,000, for any information leading to the capture of the brutal murderer who had claimed the lives of 2 young women. This announcement, combined with the establishment of a dedicated hotline for tips, sparked hope that new information might finally come to light. The police's decision to revisit the case suggested that they had uncovered fresh data, though the specifics remained undisclosed. Despite these efforts, no major breakthroughs materialized. Investigators revisited earlier episodes, including the attack on Cheryl, in hopes of identifying the perpetrator. In a bid to jog her memory, detectives proposed a hypnosis session, during which she was shown photographs of various suspects, including the infamous serial killer William Patrick Fife. Under hypnosis, Cheryl identified Fife as bearing a strong resemblance to her attacker. William Patrick Fife was a notorious Canadian serial killer whose guilt in the murders of 5 women in Montreal had been conclusively proven in court. However, Fife himself admitted to having killed at least 9 victims, though the remaining bodies were never found. Detectives had long suspected his involvement in the murders of young women like Sharon and Tammy, but struggled to establish concrete connections. Fife, for his part, vehemently denied any involvement in Sharon's case, insisting that his killing spree had begun no earlier than 1979. Sharon had been murdered in 1975, creating a frustrating gap that left the charges against him as little more than speculation. Over the years, law enforcement officers made multiple attempts to connect the tragic deaths of Sharon Pryor and other schoolgirls to some of Canada's most dangerous criminals. One of the suspects who came under scrutiny was Mike French. Mike had lived in the same area back in 1975, the year Sharon was brutally murdered. However, just 2 years after the crime, Mike and his parents relocated to another city, leaving many unanswered questions in their wake. Witnesses came forward claiming to have overheard Mike boasting about his involvement in Sharon's horrific death. These statements raised significant suspicion, but the police were unable to gather sufficient evidence to confirm his culpability. It wasn't until June 2022 that a long-awaited breakthrough finally occurred in this high-profile case. Experts identified a DNA profile in a database that matched the sample taken from the shirt found at the scene of Sharon's murder. This discovery reignited the investigation and brought the possibility of solving the case within reach. The DNA analysis pointed to Franklin Romine as the owner of the genetic material. Franklin had died under suspicious circumstances back in 1982, making it necessary for investigators to exhume his remains to carry out further testing. On May 23, 2023, forensic scientists officially confirmed the match between the biological traces found at the crime scene and Franklin's DNA. This revelation marked a significant milestone in the decades-long investigation. Franklin Romine's appearance perfectly aligned with the descriptions of the suspect provided by witnesses. He had lived in the same area where Sharon's abduction took place, and his vehicle matched the tire tracks found near her body. Adding to the damning evidence was Franklin's criminal history, which included a prior conviction for assault. These connections allowed investigators to finally piece together the puzzle of Sharon's tragic murder. Modern DNA analysis, combined with the unwavering persistence of Sharon's family, had brought about a resolution nearly half a century after her death. Although Franklin Romine could no longer be held accountable in a court of law, the closure provided by solving the case offered a measure of solace to Sharon's grieving relatives. A concerned call from a daycare teacher shocked the family when they learned that Rachel had not picked up her 2 little boys from daycare. When Rachel's mother arrived at her house, the initial impression was deceptively calm. Rachel's car was parked outside, creating the illusion that everything was normal. However, upon entering the house, a growing sense of unease began to set in. As she ventured further inside, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. The house was in complete disarray, as if someone had desperately searched through everything, leaving chaos in their wake. The discovery in the heart of the home turned this unsettling scene into a true crime. Lying on the floor, in a pool of blood, was the lifeless body of Rachel O'Reilly. When the police arrived on the scene, they were deeply shaken. Even seasoned investigators admitted that in their years of service, they had never encountered a crime as brutal as this. Signs of violence were everywhere. Blood spattered across the walls, furniture, and even the ceiling. In this true crime documentary, we will talk about Rachel O'Reilly, who was born in 1974 in County Dublin, a northern suburb of Ireland. From the beginning, life held a peculiar mystery for Rachel. She never knew who her biological parents were. Adopted at a young age by Rose and Jim Callie, Rachel grew up in a family that had chosen love. The Callies had 4 other adopted children, creating a lively household filled with laughter and shared experiences. Despite their inability to have biological children of their own, Rose and Jim poured their hearts into their family, ensuring each child felt deeply loved and valued. Rachel was a standout from an early age. She was a bright, determined, and ambitious child who excelled in nearly every aspect of her life. Her academic performance was consistently strong, and she was known for her commitment to helping her parents around the house, always willing to lend a hand with chores or assist her younger siblings. Rachel's character was defined by her warmth and kindness. She was naturally sociable, avoided conflicts, and could build rapport with anyone she met. This ability to connect with others was complemented by her athletic prowess. She played softball competitively, breaking local records and leading her team to victories in numerous tournaments. Her achievements on the field earned her admiration from her peers and coaches alike. Beyond her athletic and academic accomplishments, Rachel had a uniquely close bond with her adoptive mother, Rose. Their relationship was built on trust and mutual respect. Rachel confided all her secrets to her mother, seeking guidance and comfort in her wisdom. Even after Rachel grew older, married, and started her own family, she continued to maintain this special connection with Rose, speaking to her often and cherishing her role as a confidant. When it came time for Rachel to plan her future, she set her sights on studying marketing at a local institution. Her ambition didn't end with academics. While pursuing her degree, she also started working as a salesperson in a department store in the city. Her work ethic was remarkable, balancing her studies, her job, and her passion for sports by joining a neighborhood softball team. Rachel's life was full of activity and purpose, and she was widely admired by those who knew her. In stark contrast, little is known about the early life of Joe O'Reilly, the man who would later become Rachel's husband. What is remembered paints a grim picture of his character. Yet details about his youth remain sparse. Born in 1972 in County Dublin, Joe grew up in a modest family alongside his older sister. He was the second child of parents who emphasized the values of hard work and independence. The O'Reilly household was not one of luxury, but it was one where discipline and self-reliance were deeply instilled. Joe was a tall, athletic boy with a love for softball, a sport he played throughout his youth. After finishing high school, he pursued a correspondence course in advertising, demonstrating a certain level of ambition. To support himself, Joe took a job as a manager at a department store. It was here, just a few months later, that fate brought Rachel. Joe was 19 years old, and Rachel was only 17 when their paths first crossed. From the moment he laid eyes on Rachel, Joe was captivated. The new employee's sparkling blonde hair and radiant personality immediately drew his attention. Determined to win her over, Joe wasted no time introducing himself and making his interest clear. However, Rachel was not easily swayed. For reasons she kept to herself, she firmly rejected Joe's initial advances, refusing to go on a date with him. Undeterred, Joe launched a relentless campaign to gain her affection. He left small gifts for her at work, flowers, chocolates, and handwritten notes. He complimented her often, going out of his way to make her smile. The other employees at the department store watched Joe's efforts with fascination, his unyielding persistence becoming a topic of daily conversation. Yet Rachel remained unmoved, keeping her distance despite his obvious devotion. Joe, however, was not one to give up easily. In a calculated move, he began reading her favorite novel, hoping it would give him something meaningful to discuss with her. This strategy earned him some attention, but it was not enough to win her heart. The turning point came when Joe discovered Rachel's passion for softball. Realizing this was his chance to connect with her on a deeper level, he joined her at the practice field and began playing alongside her. Having played the sport for years, Joe showcased his skills, impressing both Rachel and her teammates. His contributions led the team to victory, finally breaking down the barriers Rachel had put up. Seeing this new side of him, Rachel agreed to go on a date with Joe. This marked the beginning of a whirlwind romance. Joe spared no effort in demonstrating his love and devotion to Rachel. From the very beginning of their relationship, he showered her with affection and attention that seemed almost too good to be true. Their connection deepened rapidly, propelled by Joe's grand romantic gestures and his apparent determination to make Rachel feel like the most cherished woman in the world. One particularly unforgettable moment came when Joe surprised Rachel with an extravagant trip to Paris, the city of love. As they wandered hand in hand through the charming cobblestone streets, Rachel felt as if she were living in a dream. Their journey culminated atop the Eiffel Tower, where Joe, with a mixture of nervousness and fervor, proposed to her. His heartfelt declaration left Rachel overwhelmed with emotion. Tears streaming down her face, she said yes, believing with all her heart that she had found her Prince Charming, the man who would provide her with the fairy tale life she had always longed for. To Rachel, Joe seemed to embody perfection. Attentive, loving, and full of promises for a bright future. Their love story continued to unfold like a romantic novel. A few years after their Paris engagement, They tied the knot in a beautiful and elegant ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Every detail of the wedding reflected their shared joy and optimism for the life they were about to embark upon together. Guests marveled at the couple's radiant smiles and the deep connection they seemed to share. Their happiness was further solidified with the birth of their first son, a moment that brought tears of joy to Rachel's eyes. Not long after, their second son was born, completing their little family and filling their lives with even more love and purpose. As their family grew, so did their aspirations. Seeking a tranquil and idyllic environment to raise their children, Rachel and Joe made the decision to move to the serene Scottish province of Knoll. They purchased a spacious home nestled among rolling green hills, with picturesque views that seemed to promise peace and stability. The house, with its cozy interior and sprawling garden, was the perfect setting for family life. Rachel imagined their children growing up in this safe haven, running freely through the garden. Everything about their new life seemed to align with Rachel's dreams of domestic bliss. Following the birth of their first son, Rachel decided to leave her job and dedicate herself fully to her family. She embraced her roles as wife and mother with unwavering enthusiasm and love. When their second son arrived 2 years later, Rachel's devotion only deepened. She poured herself into caring for her children, ensuring they were nurtured, loved, and supported during every moment of their formative years. She spent her days organizing activities, reading bedtime stories, and creating a warm and loving environment where her boys could thrive. Meanwhile, Joe took on the role of the family's primary breadwinner. He secured a position as an outdoor advertising specialist at a prestigious advertising agency, a role that required both creativity and dedication. Joe's charisma and ambition quickly set him apart in the workplace. Colleagues admired his confidence, punctuality, and strong work ethic. He was known for his ability to handle even the most challenging tasks with ease and professionalism. Joe's dedication to his job often saw him staying late to complete projects or arriving early to prepare for important presentations. His efforts did not go unnoticed. He earned the respect and admiration of his peers, cementing his reputation as a reliable and driven professional. Despite his demanding work schedule, Joe made a concerted effort to maintain his athletic lifestyle. He was an early riser, frequently heading to the gym before starting his workday. At home, he had even set up a modest workout area equipped with dumbbells, an exercise bike, and other fitness essentials. To anyone looking in from the outside, Joe seemed to embody the ideal of a successful, well-rounded man. As the years went by and their sons grew older, Rachel decided to take on some work of her own to contribute to the family's income. She began selling household items and became a distributor for a popular cosmetics brand. This venture not only provided her with a sense of accomplishment, but also allowed her to engage more with her neighbors and community. Rachel's friendly and approachable nature made her a beloved figure in the neighborhood. She was often described as kind, sociable, and deeply devoted to her family. Her cheerful demeanor and willingness to help others only added to her growing reputation as an ideal mother and neighbor. However, beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, trouble was brewing. As Joe's career advanced, he began spending less and less time at home. His absences became more frequent, with excuses ranging from late-night meetings to pressing deadlines. Often, he would return home only to shower, change clothes, and sleep before heading back out work. Although Joe attributed his increasingly erratic schedule to the demands of his job and the promise of an impending promotion, the emotional distance between him and Rachel grew. Rachel's efforts to support him and maintain their connection seemed to go unnoticed, leaving her feeling isolated and unappreciated. What had once been a partnership built on love and trust was slowly unraveling, leaving Rachel to navigate the challenges of parenthood and marriage largely on her own. In the summer of 2004, an unexpected and deeply unsettling event shattered their lives. Child Protective Services received an anonymous letter accusing Rachel of being a neglectful and abusive mother to her 2 young sons, who were 4 and 2 years old at the time. The allegations were both shocking and baseless, yet they prompted an immediate investigation. A special commission was dispatched to the O'Reilly home to assess the situation. For Rachel, the experience was nothing short of harrowing. She was questioned extensively, her parenting scrutinized, and her home thoroughly inspected. To her relief, the investigators found no evidence to support the allegations. Rachel's neighbors and relatives rallied around her, unanimously attesting to her character as a caring and attentive mother. They described her as someone who went above and beyond to ensure her children's well-being, often putting their needs ahead of her own. While the investigation ultimately cleared Rachel of any wrongdoing, the damage had already been done. The mere existence of such accusations cast a shadow over her life, leaving her shaken and filled with doubt. Rachel couldn't help but wonder who could have made such a malicious claim and why they would seek to disrupt her family's happiness. Monday, October 4th, 2004, began as an ordinary day in the O'Reilly household. Joe left for work early in the morning, as was his custom, while Rachel and the boys were still asleep. Throughout the day, he tried to reach Rachel multiple times by phone, but she didn't answer. Growing increasingly worried, he called the home phone, but each time the answering machine picked up. His voice trembled as he left messages, pleading with Rachel to call him back and expressing his mounting concern. In the afternoon, Joe received a call from the boys' kindergarten teacher who informed him that Rachel had failed to pick up the children, something entirely out of character for her. Alarmed, Joe immediately contacted Rachel's mother, Rose, to ask if she had heard from her daughter. When Rose replied that she hadn't, Joe begged her to go to their home and check on Rachel while he went to the kindergarten to collect the boys. When Rose arrived at the O'Reilly home, she was greeted by an eerie silence. Rachel's car was parked in the driveway, indicating she was home, but the house itself was dark and quiet. Rose knocked and called out to her daughter, but there was no response. As she entered the house, she was struck by the scene before her. Drawers and cabinets were open, their contents scattered across the floor, giving the impression of a robbery. Her heart pounding, Rose searched the house for her daughter. When she entered the bedroom, she was met with a horrifying sight that would haunt her forever. Rachel's lifeless body lay on the floor in a massive pool of blood. The gruesome scene. Blood spattered the walls, furniture, and even the ceiling, evidence of a violent struggle. Rose rushed to her daughter's side, desperately hoping she was still alive. However, when she touched Rachel's arm, it was cold and rigid. The reality was undeniable. Rachel had been dead for hours. Overcome with grief and panic, Rose lost all composure. She screamed for help, ran to the phone, and dialed the police. Her cries alerted neighbors, one of whom was a doctor. The doctor hurried to the scene but could only confirm the heartbreaking truth. Rachel was beyond saving. When Joe arrived at the house, the scene was already chaotic, with a crowd of neighbors and onlookers gathered around. The flashing lights of police cars illuminated the darkening evening, casting an eerie glow over the tragic setting. As soon as Joe was informed that Rachel was dead, his reaction was immediate and visceral. He screamed in disbelief, his voice echoing over the murmurs of the crowd. Without hesitation, he ran into the house, pushing past officers and ignoring their attempts to stop him. He insisted that he needed to see for himself, unable to accept the devastating news. In the bedroom, the sight of Rachel's lifeless body in a pool of blood sent Joe into a fit of hysteria. He collapsed to his knees beside her, wailing uncontrollably. Tears streamed down his face as he cried out, cursing the unknown person responsible for the brutal attack. "Whoever did this, I swear I'll kill them," he shouted, his voice a mixture of rage and despair. The scene was deeply emotional, but some officers on the scene couldn't help but notice something unusual in his demeanor. The crime scene itself was unlike anything the investigators had encountered before. The level of violence inflicted on Rachel was horrifying. It was evident that the weapon used was a heavy, blunt object, wielded with terrifying force. Rachel's body bore the marks of relentless brutality, with no part of her left unscathed. What puzzled the detectives was the apparent lack of defensive wounds. It seemed as though Rachel had been attacked from behind, giving her no opportunity to resist or fight back. The excessive violence suggested deep personal animosity rather than a random act of violence. The scene had been staged to look like a robbery. Drawers were pulled open and their contents strewn across the floor. However, the detectives' instincts told them that this was no ordinary break-in. Robbers seldom attacked with such ferocity, and the scattered belongings seemed more like an afterthought. It was clear that the crime was fueled by personal motives, possibly intense anger or resentment. The question loomed large. Who could harbor such hatred toward a young mother of two? The investigation began with interviews of family members and neighbors. Without exception, everyone described Rachel as a kind, friendly, and well-liked woman. She had no known enemies, and no one could recall her being involved in any conflicts. On the day of the murder, the neighbors reported seeing nothing out of the ordinary. No strange cars, no unfamiliar faces. Rachel's life appeared peaceful and uncontroversial, making the crime even more baffling. Joe provided an alibi, stating that he had been on the other side of town at a bus terminal for work. A co-worker confirmed his story, claiming that Joe had called him during the day. Despite this corroboration, the police couldn't shake their doubts about Joe's involvement. Something about his behavior didn't sit right with them. As the investigation progressed, the detectives uncovered several strange details. For instance, although the house appeared ransacked, nothing of significant value was taken. A stack of $5,000 lay untouched in a bedside table. Another stash of cash in the kitchen remained undisturbed. A jewelry box on the dressing table was left intact, save for a few missing items, a pair of chains and earrings. Additionally, Joe reported that a digital camera, some silverware, and one of his dumbbells were missing. It was the dumbbell that particularly interested the investigators, as they suspected it to be the murder weapon. The mystery deepened when a bag containing some of the supposedly stolen items was discovered in the bushes 2 miles from the crime scene. Inside were the missing jewelry, the silverware, and the camera. The presence of these items raised serious questions. If this was a robbery, why would the thief abandon the loot so close to the scene? The answer seemed clear. The robbery was staged, and the true motive was murder. With these findings, Joe quickly became the prime suspect. One detective later remarked that Joe's emotions seemed more performative than genuine. His tears and trembling appeared exaggerated, as though he were playing a role rather than reacting naturally. When asked if he suspected Rachel of having an affair, Joe's response was oddly defensive. He flatly denied any infidelity on his part, but his tone was unconvincing and his words felt hollow. The investigators began piecing together Joe's movements on the day of the murder. He claimed to have started his day at the gym, a routine he followed regularly. Security footage from the gym and its parking lot confirmed his presence there in the early morning. From the gym, he drove to his workplace before heading to the bus terminal to oversee an advertising project. A co-worker verified that Joe had called him during this time, seemingly strengthening his alibi. However, a deeper examination of Joe's actions revealed inconsistencies. Investigators seized his computer from his workplace and began analyzing its contents. It was during this process that they uncovered a troubling discovery. Joe had partially erased several emails. The deleted messages, painstakingly recovered by forensic experts, provided a crucial breakthrough in the investigation. As the emails were analyzed, they revealed troubling insights into Joe's state of mind and his deteriorating relationship with Rachel. The majority of his correspondence was with his sister and a close friend, and in these exchanges, Joe frequently vented about his wife in vulgar and disparaging terms. His words painted a picture of a man deeply embittered and resentful. Investigators noted that Joe's language toward Rachel was filled with disgust and contempt, reflecting his long-standing disinterest in her as a partner. However, the most damning discovery came in the form of a series of emails exchanged between Joe and a coworker named Nikki Pell. These messages left little doubt that their relationship extended far beyond a professional one. The correspondence was laced with affectionate undertones and veiled promises, making it clear that Joe and Nikki were engaged in a clandestine affair. Nikki Pell, as investigators soon learned, was an advertising professional who worked closely with Joe. Despite being 10 years older than him, their age difference had not deterred them from starting an illicit relationship. While the exact timeline of their affair remained unclear, it was evident that Joe had spent many late nights and even entire evenings at Nikki's house, deceiving Rachel with fabricated work obligations. The most alarming aspect of the emails, however, was Joe's promises to Nikki that they would soon be together as a family. Not just the two of them, but also his sons, Rachel's children. Since custody of the boys would almost certainly remain with their mother in the event of a divorce, these statements raised deeply suspicious questions. Initially, Joe denied having any extramarital relationships. But as the evidence mounted, he reluctantly admitted to the affair, though he claimed that his relationship with Nikki had ended. His partial confession only added to the investigators' suspicions, as it appeared he was attempting to mitigate the damage while hiding the full extent of his deceit. For over a week, the O'Reilly residence remained sealed off as investigators meticulously examined the crime scene. Every inch of the house was scrutinized, photographed, and cataloged for evidence. During this period, Joe stayed with his sister, while his sons were cared for by their grandparents. Despite the gravity of the situation, Joe's behavior raised eyebrows. At Rachel's funeral, he displayed an unsettling composure. Rather than grieving openly, he appeared detached. His interactions with Rachel's coffin were particularly disturbing. He avoided this for most of the ceremony, and when it was his turn to say goodbye, he made a short remark, ordered the coffin closed, and left without the slightest hint of emotion. When the family was finally allowed to return to the house, the sight of the crime scene, still bearing the scars of Rachel's brutal murder, should have been unbearable. Joe's mother-in-law and father-in-law accompanied him, believing he would need their emotional support. Instead, Joe's behavior took an unnerving turn. He began speculating aloud about how the killer might have carried out the attack. Walking through the blood-streaked room, he pointed out specific spots where Rachel had been struck, describing the force and trajectory of the blows with unsettling detail. He even mimed the attack, gesturing as if he were wielding the murder weapon himself. At one point, Joe suggested that the assailant had washed up in the bathroom and disposed of the weapon before leaving the house. His morbid fascination with the crime scene alarmed Rachel's parents, but they rationalized his behavior as an attempt to cope with the trauma. Privately, however, Rachel's mother, Rose, harbored grave doubts. She later admitted that from the beginning, she had suspected Joe's involvement in her daughter's death. Though she had tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, his increasingly bizarre actions only strengthened her conviction. Joe's craving for attention became apparent in the days following Rachel's funeral. He actively sought out media coverage, granting interviews to journalists and inviting reporters into his home. He conducted tours of the crime scene, describing the events of that fateful day with an almost theatrical flair. In each interview, he appeared to address the killer directly, urging them to surrender to authorities. 3 weeks after Rachel's death, the family participated in a television program about the murder. Rachel's parents, visibly grief-stricken, struggled to contain their emotions on camera. In stark contrast, Joe seemed to relish the spotlight. He chatted animatedly with the crew, discussing how best to present himself on screen. During breaks, he indulged in the catered snacks, sipping coffee and munching on sweets as though he were attending a casual event rather than revisiting a personal tragedy. The police, who had grown increasingly suspicious of Joe O'Reilly, decided to place him under close surveillance. This decision soon paid off. Officers discreetly followed Joe after a filming session for a television program and discovered that he did not return home as one might expect of a grieving widower. Instead, he went directly to his mistress, Nikki Pell, and spent the night at her residence. By this point, the investigators' doubts about Joe's involvement in Rachel's murder had all but vanished. What remained was the arduous task of gathering irrefutable evidence that would hold up in court. Building a case against Joe was a painstaking process, requiring months of work and cross-referencing. The breakthrough came when two pivotal witnesses, Nikki Pell and the colleague who had previously corroborated Joe's alibi, agreed to speak with the police. Both individuals faced potential jail time for perjury, and the weight of this threat persuaded them to cooperate. Nikki admitted that her romantic relationship with Joe had never ended, directly contradicting Joe's earlier claims that they had broken up. She also disclosed a significant and explosive detail. Rachel had discovered their affair shortly before the murder. This revelation had led to a heated argument between Rachel and Joe on the night before her death. The colleague, meanwhile, confessed that he had vouched for Joe's alibi at his friend's request, unaware at the time that Joe was a murder suspect. He admitted that he had no direct knowledge of Joe's whereabouts during the critical hours of Rachel's murder. With these revelations, the foundation of Joe's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. Recovered correspondence from Joe's computer, in which he insulted his wife and planned his future with his mistress and children, was also attached to the case. The police also analyzed Joe's numerous public statements and media appearances, noting a disturbing pattern. In interviews and during the filming of the television program, Joe spoke about Rachel's murder with a level of detail that only the perpetrator could possess. He described aspects of the crime scene, the nature of the injuries, and the movements of the killer in ways that could not have been known to an innocent party. Investigators concluded that Joe's careless remarks had inadvertently allowed them to reconstruct the crime in full. On the morning of the murder, Joe deliberately set the stage to establish an alibi. He went to the gym, ensuring he was seen by the facility's security cameras and other patrons. He then informed his colleagues that he would be out of the office for most of the day, working at a remote location, and that his phone might be unavailable. Instead of heading to the bus terminal as he claimed, Joe returned home. Armed with a dumbbell, he hid in the marital bedroom, waiting for Rachel to return after dropping the boys off at kindergarten. When Rachel entered the house, Joe attacked her from behind, striking her with brutal force. The assault was swift and left her no chance to defend herself. After the murder, Joe meticulously cleaned the dumbbell and washed the blood off himself in the ensuite bathroom. He changed into fresh clothes and staged the scene to resemble a robbery, scattering items around the house to mislead investigators. On his way out, he disposed of the murder weapon, his bloodied clothes, and several items to strengthen the illusion of a break-in. To further bolster his alibi, Joe called Rachel's phone multiple times, leaving voicemails in a concerned tone and sending text messages asking her to call him back. Later at work, his behavior raised subtle red flags. Colleagues observed that he seemed unusually jittery, his hands trembling slightly. When asked if he was feeling unwell, Joe deflected the questions and quickly retreated to his office. Shortly after, he received the call from the kindergarten, informing him that Rachel had failed to pick up the boys. Instead of rushing home, Joe instructed Rachel's mother, Rose, to check on her daughter, ensuring that she would be the one to discover the gruesome scene. His desire for publicity and attention worked against him, even though he believed he had considered all possibilities and that proving his guilt would be impossible. It took the police 2 years to build a case strong enough to arrest Joe. By meticulously reconstructing his movements on the day of the murder, investigators were able to confirm his presence at the family home during the critical window of time. Mobile phone records played a pivotal role. Data from cell towers showed that Joe's phone was at the house when Rachel was killed, contradicting his alibi. During the trial, additional shocking details emerged. It was revealed that the anonymous letter sent to Child Protective Services, accusing Rachel of being an abusive mother, had been authored by Joe's mother at his behest. This letter was part of Joe's calculated strategy to undermine Rachel's reputation and position himself as the more suitable parent in the event of a divorce. However, the accusations in the letter were thoroughly investigated and found to be baseless, further exposing Joe's manipulative tactics. Joe O'Reilly, emboldened by his arrogance and unwavering belief in his own invincibility, decided to act with audacity and certainty during his trial. He exuded an air of confidence, as though he believed his release was inevitable. Throughout the proceedings, Joe displayed a startling lack of remorse. He laughed openly, conversed animatedly with his legal team, and even cracked jokes in the courtroom. His demeanor shocked many in attendance, including Rachel's grieving family, who watched in disbelief as Joe treated the trial as though it were a mere formality rather than a fight for justice. Despite his nonchalant attitude, the summer of 2007 would bring a reckoning. After months of compelling testimony, irrefutable evidence, and emotional appeals, the court found Joe O'Reilly guilty of the brutal murder of his wife, Rachel. The verdict sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Joe, who had maintained his composure throughout the trial, finally appeared shaken as the sentence was read aloud. Joe's lawyers immediately vowed to challenge the decision. They filed multiple complaints and appeals, arguing procedural errors and insufficient evidence. Yet, despite their persistent efforts, every appeal was rejected. The courts upheld the original ruling, reaffirming Joe O'Reilly's guilt and his life sentence.